From the Cactus, KCTS-FM Phoenix, I'm Jamison Greenwood with Greenwood & Company. Well, I hope everybody's been having a good week again. I hope that you are excited to have your costumes purchased. I know that Spirit of Halloween is starting to run pretty low on their costumes that are available now. When I look back at my radio career, I think my natural talents were always in more of the entertainment radio and in poetry, literature, things of that nature. But at one time, I thought that maybe I wanted to be a journalist. Now, eventually I realized that wasn't the course I want to go, but I had some pretty interesting adventures while I was doing that, one of which was pretty hilarious, and I can't do you the injustice of keeping it to myself any longer. If there's one thing I have learned about the world, it's that society seems to have an aversion to people making a successful living via creative endeavors. Math and science courses were always a struggle for me, and though I enjoyed drawing and painting, I didn't have the patience to perform the intricate feats of the masters like Botticelli, Rembrandt, or Charles M. Schulz. As I passed through each grade, my writing got more and more compliments from my family, friends, and teachers, so by the end of high school I settled on being an author, which had all the benefits I was looking for. I wouldn't have to get up early, I wouldn't have to sit in deadlock traffic, no office politics, no sense of being nothing more than a cog in the machine. But Mom and Dad were skeptical. "How are you going to make money?" my mother asked. She was an accountant, so this question would be obvious coming from her, but even Dad, who worked as the curator at the zoo's reptile house, a passion for him, was right behind her. "I had to go through a lot of work to be the curator," Dad said. "I had to write articles about snake poop." Although my parents disagreed with my majoring in English when I got to High Country University, I did assuage them by agreeing to do it as an English secondary education rather than a full-fledged focus on creative writing. This would allow me to have job security as a teacher, but fearing this could burn me out based on horror stories my Grammy Benson had shared from her years teaching high school, I thought it would behoove me to diversify my skills even further. But how? Much like Nick Carraway did when he first arrived at West Egg, I studied articles on investing and license requirements, hoping I could use personal finance as a backup, but the intricate nature of calls and puts failed to interest me, as did the realization that the SEC did not really do anything to stop fraudulent trades, given that whole Bernie Madoff scandal. Since Mom and Dad would ask me frequently to help with setups when we would purchase a new family desktop, I took a coding class, hoping I might be able to have a future in IT, but the professor was still teaching Microsoft DOS and would not let us use debugging features built into the scriptwriter, despite the fact these were the most helpful in figuring out what to do. Now, when I began attending St. Edward's Episcopal Church, the head verger, Art, a retired physics professor, recruited me to serve as a lector one Sunday, reading that week's New Testament lesson from chapter 4 of Paul's letter to the Philippians, which would change my life. "I want you to give the sermon," Joe, one of the baritones in the choir, said after the service. I didn't think God was calling me to ordained ministry, but I had been debating about trying my hand at the college radio station, and Joe's compliments cemented the deal. At the radio station, I became good friends with the assistant news director, Gabe Cunningham, who encouraged me to write for the newspaper as well, so when classes opened up again for enrollment, I signed up for the 1 credit that was required to join the newspaper. The news and opinions section met every Monday morning from 11:30 to 11:50 to go over assignments and housekeeping, and I met Harper, the news editor, who helped acquaint us with each of the different systems we would use to submit our pitches and turn in and revise our completed stories. This portion was no trouble, but several problems came soon after. The second Saturday of the semester there was an all-staff meeting to go over specific concepts in depth from 9 to 1, and despite knowing I'd have to go there in the morning, I stayed up until midnight reading The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe for a class I was taking, trying to compile some notes I took in my Moleskine on the melting snow and ice clinging to the ponderosas, then lying awake thinking about Annabelle and working for the New York Times or NPR as I tried to fall asleep. Because of this and a caramel Ghirardelli bar that I made the mistake of eating around 10 p.m., I woke up at 8:35, leaving me 5 minutes to get ready and 10 to walk from my room at Tatum Hall to the HCU Communications Building. Somehow I found the time to get my gray suit on, but I did not have time to shave or find the plaid purple tie I hoped to wear, so I had to go with a black Art Deco tie instead. Therefore, when we got in line to take photos for press badges, I was disappointed in my unwashed thin hair, 5 o'clock shadow, and dismal look of a 20s funeral tie. Worse still was my hesitant expression, which did not show me smiling, but rather a mouth which had just finished asking, "Should I smile now?" as the photographer snapped the shutter. The headshot was an embarrassment, but I suppose it was no worse than the photo on my driver's license, in which I appear intoxicated beyond the legal limit, despite the fact I don't drink. However, the rest of the meeting wasn't bad, and in the end, a conversation between Harper and my friend Gabe caught my attention. "Channing's got a final and he can't do the interview with Mayor Leaf," Harper said. "And I can't do it because I got that broadcasters convention," Gabe shook his head. Harper sighed. "I'm in way over my head as it is." In a rare display of confidence, I asked, "Harper, would you like me to do it?" Gabe's eyes went wide. "Jimmy would be perfect to interview the mayor." "Well," Harper said, "normally we'd have someone more senior do it, but I think you might be the right person for this job. He's always covering both sides of politics in his newscasts," Gabe added. "He doesn't go for Hollywood drama." Harper smiled. "It's yours if you want it, Jimmy." I accepted. Then I realized I had no idea who the mayor of Pinebough even was, whether he was a Democrat or a Republican, nor what he had accomplished in his term or even his goals. I researched as much as I could, but I knew I was in for a difficult visit when I stepped inside the Pinebough City Hall, waiting for my appointment with the Honorable Mayor Ronald G. Leaf. It seemed like an eternity while I waited for my appointment with the mayor, and it will feel even longer when I confess that we have to take a short break, but we'll get to meet Mayor Ronald Leaf as soon as we come back. You're listening to Greenwood and Company on KCTS. Spooky season's here, and Pinkerton Motors has scary good deals now through October 31st. Take home a rust-covered 1968 Volkswagen Microbus for only $800. The scent of pot and the ghosts of hippies that died in it may haunt you, but you can't get a better deal. Just pay separate for the missing transmission. Or buy a fully customized 1990 Lincoln Town Car with orange interior and a skull hood ornament. The perfect car for Halloween with enough room for 6 dead bodies in the trunk. Off the lot, 0 down for $950. Brakes not included. And if you want to scare trick-or-treaters half to death, buy a Harley-Davidson complete with sidecar and extra loud engine with butane-enhanced exhaust. Only $300 and only seconds away from falling apart. If you need a cheap vehicle but don't care much about safety, come to Pinkerton Motors, San Marcos Street and Ponderosa Highway, just south of Route 66 in the city of Pinebough. Warning, Pinkerton Motors is not licensed and bonded by the state of Arizona and will not pay for any injuries incurred during test drives or from vehicles purchased. And welcome back. You are listening to Greenwood and Company on the Cactus, KCTS. Now, before the break, I was waiting for admission to my appointment to interview the mayor of Pinebough, Ronald G. Leaf. The mayor's secretary, a woman who reminded me of Aunt Bee from the Andy Griffith Show, motioned for me to come back. Ronald Leaf stood up and shook my hand, but he was only about 5 feet 5 inches tall and had short brown hair beginning to turn gray and a nose that looked like it was 3 or 4 sizes too small. "Thanks for coming," he smiled as I shook his hand. "Joey," he asked for my name in his prominent Texas accent. "Jamison," I replied, "but you can call me Jimmy." "I see." He paused. "Thanks for coming." I had a list of questions prepared for the mayor, specifically on his biggest accomplishments and the biggest challenges as Pinebough's leader, but he had his own agenda. "You know, Jeremiah," he still forgot my name, "the nuclear plant out by the Turquoise Mustang Lodge has been such a boon to Pinebough's economy. I don't know where to begin on how much nuclear power means to me, all that fission of atoms together. I didn't have the heart to tell him that he had mixed up fission and fusion, but soon tried to ask him another question. How have you addressed the concerns of those who don't like the nuclear plant? I feared he might take offense at my using the word nuclear.
Well, you see, Jeremy, in order to take care of people's concerns of nuclear energy, you first have to understand what nuclear energy is. All that fission and fusion stuff. If you can convince them that you know what that is the key.
I tried to bring up as many hard news questions as I could, but every time Ronald Leaf seemed more interested in talking about fusion, fission, and nuclear energy. We were reaching the end of our time, so I switched tacks. What are some of your hobbies, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I play the trumpet.
Then his eyes peeked up.
Say, I'll play it for you right now, Jaden.
Mayor Leaf then proceeded to play a song for me, which sounded like an air raid siren suffering from shortness of breath. Although I smiled and praised the selection as excellent, I think I meant it was excellent that the song was over.
That's my heart belongs to Daddy,
proclaimed the mayor. It didn't sound like any Cole Porter I ever heard, and to accurately describe it would require me to use language that is forbidden by the Federal Communications Commission, but I will say I feared in the immediate aftermath that the best recordings by Louis Armstrong and Wynton Marsalis on full blast from the stereo of a Cadillac Escalade couldn't possibly eradicate that horrifying memory of Ronald Leaf's trumpet. With the notes I compiled, I tried my best to put together a coherent 500-word profile, but all I could come up with for a title was Mayor Discusses Benefits of Nuclear Energy and Plays the Trumpet. Upon editorial review, a couple of grammatical errors were noted, some of which I understood, but the main issues the grammarian had with it were my ignorance of Associated Press style. This is not a big deal in radio, and I found it annoying because it meant I had to write in a way that wasn't as conversational. But after a few rounds, they accepted the story and submitted it for print. 2 weeks later, the story was published, but nobody spoke much about it. Then I was at the counter at Brubeck's one evening, sipping a decaf coffee that Colton had just made for me, when I heard the door open. I turned around, and my eyes went wide when I saw Mayor Ronald Leaf. He was approaching Colton to place his order, but I stopped the mayor in his tracks.
Well, if it isn't Jacob Greenwald.
By this time I had long given up on correcting him about the name, but I was still embarrassed to see him. I feared he might bring up that I forgot to send him a link to the story once it was published, but with my luck all he said was,
"You wrote such a great article about me. I don't think you spelled nuclear right, but that don't matter."
With a sigh of relief, I introduced him to Colton and Heather, the other barista who had returned from the back, and we talked quite a bit about Pinebough, the Arizona High Country, the Grand Canyon, and other places we loved. Then Annabelle came by. Ronald Leaf saw her saxophone and became interested in talking to her.
"Your buddy Jerome wrote such a nice article about me."
"Jimmy's a great writer." Annabelle smiled, and her green eyes brushed against my heart as they always do. "He's a poet. He tells funny stories on the radio."
"Our local Garrison Keeler."
The mayor patted my back. Annabelle removed her saxophone from its case and began to assemble it. "What brings you to Brubeck's, Mayor Leaf?"
"Well," he said, "I'm going to treat you to some of the best trumpet in the Arizona High Country."
"Great," Annabelle smiled. I smiled too, but I knew that I would no doubt have some explaining to do before the end of the night, and I'll just say I'm glad that Colton, Heather, and Annabelle were still my friends after we listened to that Dragon Claw on a Chalkboard Pane and Disgrace to Tin Pan Alley that was the music of Mayor Ronald Leaf's trumpet. You're listening to Greenwood and Company on KCTS. Maybe you're in the mood for popcorn, but you don't want to make the effort to ensure it's delicious. Maybe you have an old microwave you want to get rid of, but it seems irresponsible. That's where Prince and Popper microwave popcorn comes in. We don't want to know what the hyper-processed butter in the bag is really made of, but its formula is guaranteed to give your popcorn that old-fashioned stovetop taste, with as many unpopped kernels as possible. And the aluminum coating inside the bag will trigger dangerous electric sparks until that old microwave's downright unusable. It's two great benefits rolled into one. Why wait? Pick up a bag of Prince and Popper microwave popcorn today. Prince and Popper microwave popcorn may contain allergens along with asbestos and other carcinogenic chemicals. This product is known to cause athlete's foot in the state of Arizona. Do not store near heat source or flammable materials. Consult a physician with a revoked license prior to use. Prince and Popper microwave popcorn, available at Giggett supermarkets and other subpar retailers. Additional funding for Greenwood and Company comes from the Society for Cats with Mathematics Test Anxiety, from the Shag Carpet Preservation Fund, and from the Folding Chair Charitable Trusts. Now, as that story shows, there are several common experiences that all journalists encounter, such as politicians who are particularly talented at dodging the questions you actually want them to answer. But every journalist is different in terms of how they like to record their information. Some like to hit the record button on their phone. Some like to use fancy notebooks. I always enjoyed using legal pads, and one time was inspired to write this poem on my last sheet on my legal pad. The last sheet on a legal pad elicits many emotions. A new pad soon will be needed. There's not much room to plot a novel, a scholarly article, an indictment, or a murder trial. Yet there exists room enough for similes and metaphors, rhymes and meters, imagery, describing sounds and smells, the taste of a nearby cup of tea or coffee, maybe beer or wine. The last sheet of a legal pad can serve as a simple way to capture the small pleasures throughout the day you've had. That brings an end to this week's Greenwood and Company. Our show was created and hosted by yours truly and was written by him along with James Salison and Minnesota Martinez. The engineer is Ivan Crosby. Jonas Andrews answers the phones even though we don't take calls on this program. The theme was composed by Martin Landstrom, and our costumes are provided by Grandma's Garage Thrift Shop. All the characters, settings, and situations depicted in this program, along with all advertised products, are entirely fictional, and any similarities to products, events, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Also, KCTS is not an actual radio station. Be sure to visit our website at JamisonGreenwoodPodcast.com to learn more about Greenwood and Company, and make sure to follow us on the podcast platform of your choice and share with your friends on social media. Just a reminder to please be careful if you are going out on the 101, the 17, or Route 66 tonight. I'm Jamison Greenwood, and until we meet again, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay young at heart. Good night. This is KCTS FM Phoenix. Stay tuned for Lacking in Substance.